20s who fought and screamed all the fucking time. And when they weren't fighting, they took turns having loud, obnoxious sex in the wee hours of the morning. One day, boyfriend gets violent and the cops take him away. Girl continues living there, but she comes down to let me know that he's gone, and because I was a relatively big guy then, she says he's not supposed to come by, but can I have your number in case he does? This was before cell phones, so I gave it to her. I should mention that I have a girlfriend, Sue, at this time, and she did not like upstairs girl, Jen. Anyway, Jen calls me one night before midnight. Are you okay, I ask?
Yeah, what are you doing?
She asks. Going to bed. I have to work at 7. I work early.
Wanna come and fuck me?
She says, very direct. I have a girlfriend, Jen. Talk to you later. 2 hours later, she calls and wakes me up. She's crying.
Why don't you think I'm attractive? Why don't you wanna fuck me? I saw your girlfriend and she's fat. Why don't you wanna fuck me? I swear I won't tell anybody, but you have to break up with her. It won't work. She doesn't love you like I do.
Keep in mind, all these words are coming out at lightning speed, and she was drunk. She kept prattling on like that. I couldn't get a word in edgeways. Finally, I just hang up on her. 30 seconds later, she's banging on my door. I decide to ignore it. She starts yelling. It's almost 2 a.m. She's screaming, crying, banging on the door. I do the only thing that I can think of. I call the police. They say it'll be 45 minutes. It took them an hour, and she banged on the door, screamed, and cried the entire time. They took her back to her apartment and calmed her down. An officer takes a statement. He keeps asking, was she ever in this apartment? And questions like that. At no point did you allow her to enter this premises. She'd never ever been inside my place. She told the cops a very different story, that we'd been intimate, that I kicked her out in the middle of sex without her keys or her wallet. I told the cops that he was free to search. He looked around for 10 minutes, seemed satisfied, and then thanked me and left. At this point, it's nearly 4 a.m. 4:30 rolls around and she calls me and wakes me up. She's apologizing, she's crying, she's so sorry she got like that, but she just misses him so much. At this point, I tell her I think it's a bad idea that we talk anymore. I tell her I understand how hard it is, but that I'm going to miss work and I can't afford to miss a day's pay. She seems to get that and hangs up. I go to work after getting maybe 2 hours of sleep in total. I'm a zombie all day. I get home at 4:30, ready to crash. Soon my girlfriend was going to bring dinner by after she got off work at 8. I have 4 hours or so to sleep. My apartment seems spotless. Better yet, they vacuumed and I don't even own one yet. There are freshly made cookies on the table. Sue must have gotten off early, I think. Sue, I say, and walk to the bedroom. There, of course, is Jen. Naked except for thigh-high socks and her hair tie, lying on her back. And as I come in, she pulls her knees up to her shoulders and smiles at me and says,
Shove your fucking cock in me until I cry.
I turn around and run out of my own apartment, scared like a little boy. I would have run all the way to the office, but I was in terrible shape, so I walk. I walked into the lobby and called the police again. They came and arrested her, charged her with minor things like B&E or trespassing, forget which. And she spends a couple nights in jail, since her parents or friends didn't bail her out. Behavior like this happens for weeks. I have some friends stay at my house, including Sue, during this time, so I'm never alone because I'm worried she's crazy and might do something weird. She consistently knocks on the door and argues with the people staying at my place. She offers to share me with Sue, offers to go down on Sue, then eventually tries to get Sue to leave me and move in with her and that they'll be like a lesbian Bonnie and Clyde. A week or two later, she is being evicted. I guess they were late on paying rent already by like 2 months. An eviction had begun. And as some form of weird protest, she paints her upper torso and face bright pink with some kind of body paint, and wears a green bikini top as they drag her kicking and screaming out of the place. Police end up arresting her again for something. My 6-month lease is up, and I'm uncomfortable with her knowing where I live, so I move. I get an unlisted number and address. I am about 10 miles from my old place. A couple months after I move in, there's a knock at the door on a Sunday afternoon. It's Jen. She followed me from my work during the week, then waited until Sue left, and now she wanted to apologize. She says she's medicated, she wants to apologize. I tell her I can't let her in, and she needs to leave. I tell her I hope that she's better, but I cannot let her in. Predictably, she goes nuts. Another call to the cops as I lean on my door to keep her from pushing it in. Another arrest. For a while I didn't hear from her. 6 months, a year. I moved 3 states over, broke up with Sue unrelated to this, and was single. It's been about 3 to 4 years, and suddenly I get a MySpace friend request from her. I ignore it. Then I get a tirade of emails, long-winded, lacking punctuation, stream of consistencies, clearly mentally ill. I just ignore them. What else can I do? This is about 2002. It dies down a bit. 2005, I hear back from her on Facebook. Same thing. I ignore it again. 2006, Sue messages me out of the blue. Haven't talked to her in like 8 years. She says Jen had come to her work and wanted info on me, where I was and what I was doing. She was dragged out by security. 2008, Jen finds my little brother's Facebook while he's in college. Makes a road trip across 3 states to find him at school. Finds his dorm and goes to talk to him. He has no idea who she is. She threatens him. He and 2 of her friends kick her out of the dorm. He calls. I explain. He calls the cops. They do nothing. 6 months later, she accosts him at work, a bar. His boss, a female, punches her square in her mouth during a fight to get her out of the building, and Jen loses 2 teeth. She sues the bar. The owner countersues, and Jen is found mentally incompetent and placed under a form of mental hold in a facility. 2012, Jen is out of a mental institution and heavily medicated. Her counselor contacts me on Facebook. Would I like to put her past behind her, she asks. She wants to set up a face-to-face. I have a wife, I have a kid. I say no thank you. The counselor gets very frustrated and tells me I'm a terrible person. 2013. Jen commits suicide by jumping off a cliff somewhere in Arizona. Her body is found months after the fact and identified by the contents in her wallet. Part of me wonders what I did to cause this. I literally never did anything out of the ordinary or said anything out of the ordinary to her. I was just her downstairs neighbor for a couple of months by the time this started, and it caused over a decade of fixation. Mental illness is a hell of a thing. I was a 18-year-old high school senior and was about 3/4 of the way through the year. I had moved that year and switched to a school that was about 30 minutes away from where I used to go. I stayed in touch with a few of my old friends from that school and got invited to go camping with them over Memorial Weekend, which basically meant getting drunk as fuck in the forest. I invited 2 girls and 1 guy from my new school to come hang out for a night, and met them in the closest town from the campsite about 40 minutes away. The guy, Jeremy, hopped in my car, and the 2 other girls followed me up, and we got to the campsite without incident. This campsite was 30 minutes away from any human sign of life outside a shitty dirt road. The night started off fine with everybody getting completely trashed, and me beating one of the girls I brought along named Sarah at beer pong, and she was very drunk and all over me. I guess to the 18-year-old version of me, that night couldn't have been going better at that point. At about 12:30, things started to die down, as half of us have already puked, and we're heading in for the night, and I was much too drunk to try to fuck Sarah. A lot of the night is still a blur, but I remember climbing into a tent. There was 5 of us, 3 guys and 2 girls. At around 2:30 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of a shotgun. I was still very drunk and had a hard time processing anything. But in my drunken state, I figured it was one of the people I was camping with being a dick. One of the guys, Brent, had stayed sober the entire night and had brought a couple shotguns up with him, so I figured it was him being a prick to everyone who was drunk. I checked my phone and went back to sleep. I fell asleep, and at what I think was around 3 a.m., I'm woken up by someone bawling their eyes out, and I'm still having a very hard time processing anything. After about 5 minutes, I realize it's Brent, and I stumble out of my tent followed by Jeremy, and I walk out and see Brent is bleeding profusely from his nose and mouth, and I run over to him, stumbling the entire time. I am then hit in the head with a rock, and am knocked unconscious. Everything from this point is Jeremy's point of view. Jeremy, to this day, is my best friend and has told me his version of the story many times. He says I passed by a tree and a man lunges out and smashes my face with a rock. After hitting me, the man lunges at Jeremy and tackles him straight on his ass. Jeremy at the time was 5'8", 140 pounds, and he describes the man as at least 6'4" and 280. Jeremy is being choked to death by this wooden monster of a man, and he hears another gunshot from a pistol. Sarah had managed to find a pistol that Brent had also brought along with him, and fired a shot, missing the man by a large amount, but it managed to startle him, and he sprints off into the woods. They just let him go, and Jeremy drove me and Brent to the hospital. I had 3 broken teeth and a severe concussion, and Brent had part of his tongue mutilated with a knife and a broken nose. Brent has never talked to me or any of my friends from that point on about the trip and what exactly happened when the man was outside with him alone. He also refused to give a description to the police. The man was never caught, and I have never been deep in the forest again. During the midsummer, usually around the middle of July, me and a couple of my good friends, Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy, all the way through my childhood, always made time to go up to my friend's family cabin, way up in the north, in the forest of Minnesota. His cabin's located on Vermilion Lake. Throughout all of our young years, we would always go, for sure accompanied by my friend's dad, Kevin's dad, who owns the cabin, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once we were juniors in high school, we felt mature enough and old enough to go to the cabin on our own. Finally, without Kevin's dad or any adult supervision that may have accompanied us. I would like to mention a little information in regards to my friend's cabin to help you picture the scenario. My friend's cabin is very remote and very based upon a very large-sized island. Other cabins were on the island, but the next one closest to us was a solid quarter or half a mile away at least, which is my best guess, which you could get to by taking a man-made path around the island. And I want to mention that to get to my friend's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island, as his cabin is on an island, and to take his boat across the lake about a half a mile to reach the cabin. My mind always had the tendency to run around when sleeping there at night throughout all my years, for it was one level with only 2 bathrooms next to each other. A kitchen, a living room connected, and a bathroom in the back of the cabin. And when you slept in the cabin, there was always at least one window in each room with no curtains at all. so it was very easy to see outside to the woods and lake, and this is where my mind would run, so I always thought someone was peering in. Of course, nobody ever was. I had been to this cabin a dozen times throughout my lifespan, and nothing had ever happened. And the older I got, the easier I got to sleep. Now for the event. We usually would stay a week's worth, or 4 or 5 nights. On the 3rd night during the trip, when we were on our own finally, we had set up a campfire and had been drinking beers all night. I don't condone underage drinking, by the way. We just happened to sneak some, being the rebels we are. We went out to his dock to gaze up at the magnificence of the stars and enjoy the buzz, when all of a sudden we heard something out in the water. Sounded like a fish jumping out to catch a bug. We quickly looked out at the lake with curiosity, wondering where the splash came from. Thankfully the moon was out that night, which helped lit up the lake, otherwise it would be dark as black, with there being no city lights for miles upon miles, and we would have not been able to see anything on the lake. My one friend, Ryan, began to point out, saying,
what the hell is that?
After looking closely and finally spotting what he was pointing at, all I could describe it as, it simply looked like a head out in the middle of the lake, just floating about, staring at us directly. It was about 3/4 worth of a football field length away, out in the lake from the dock. There was no question that I could see its features. It had long black hair and very palish skin like a face, but couldn't see its mouth or eyes, nose or chin, as it just looked like a blob of pale skin with black hair over it. I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. The hairs on my legs, neck, arms all stood up, and I was paralyzed on the outside, ready to leave at that moment. But we told ourselves it was just a loon, as the birds are very popular night drifters on the lake, and do their hunting late at night, and also have black and white colors on their coats, and hunt by diving deep in the water, holding their breath up to minutes sometimes. So it was possible that a loon all of a sudden just popped up in the water after hunting a bit, or at least we tried to talk ourselves into that. All of us having the creeps, and noticing it wasn't moving one bit, just treading in the water, in the same place. We went back to our campfire, lit it even bigger, and headed inside to drink more. We soon forgot about the head with the help of some beers until I had to use the bathroom really bad, and the one inside was preoccupied. I just went outside to do my business, since we were in the great outdoors. When I had been taking a pee and glancing out at the beautiful moonlit lake, I noticed that the black circle object was still there, about 30 yards closer now, still looking as if it was staring right at me. I could easily see the nose on the thing. Again, it was very pale, like it hadn't seen the sun in years. A very, very uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went inside and told my other friends to come out and look quickly, keeping my eyes glued to it at the door of the cabin. We came outside to see that it was still looking at us, as if its head was cocked up at us, with its chin in the air. Nobody dared go out to the dock anymore, and we immediately went back inside, ruling out that it probably wasn't a loon, because a loon wouldn't have treaded the water in the same spot. Eventually the current would have drifted it somewhere else, in a rocking manner. For a loon to stay in the same spot for at least almost an hour, or maybe 2, made no sense to any of us. This head-like object was stiff as a board, and not moving a single muscle, just staring at us. There was no ripple effect to it at all from the lake. We said it was just a log and went back in. I could tell everyone felt uneasy too. A few hours would pass. It was super late into the night at this point, and I knew we needed to sleep. Because my curious self, I looked back outside once more, and the black object had completely vanished. I could help but feel a sense of relief thinking that the log might have floated off, or just shored somewhere. As we slept with the windows open that night, there was no AC in this cabin, and we had to open them or we would fry in the cabin in the middle of the summer. Me and my buddy Tommy slept in the room while the other 2 slept in the 2 separate rooms, with the doors open. Not being able to sleep but keeping my eyes peeled shut, I began to hear someone walking around at the bottom of the stairs to the cabin. I thought I was about to shit bricks. No question what or whoever I heard down there was on the dock now, pacing back and forth as it made the sound of boot clicking on the wood. It was as if they weren't sure what to do with themselves. It lasted for about 3 minutes. Wanting to whisper to my buddy, but frozen in fear, I just kept my eyes shut and ears on full alert. The footsteps sounded like they took 2 rapid steps up the stairs all of a sudden, but then turned around and sounded like they sprinted down the man-made path. After it sounded like the steps were long gone, and a couple of minutes had passed, I woke up Tommy, asking him if he heard the steps. Both of us sitting up, I was startled to see my friend Ryan walking out of his room and saying,
"We need to leave,"
a moment after the steps had vanished. He must have heard us talking, so he felt like he could come out as well, but either way he was waking us up regardless. Something was very disturbing about his expression, and I asked why. He woke up my other friend Kevin in the other room and said,
"Let's go. Go to the boat. It's time to go."
Asking him, What? Ryan, what the hell is wrong with you? He explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff, and I will never forget what he explained, as won't my other friends. He said when he was turning on his side on his bed to get more comfortable, he saw someone peeking in the top right corner of his window, and it quickly shifted out of view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin, and black hair long down the window. Again, another thing I would like to add. When we look back on his experience, it chills us to the bone, realizing that since the face was in the top right corner of the window of my friend's room that he was sleeping in, this thing either was damn near 8 feet tall, standing on something like bricks trying to peek in, or was floating. Ryan then continued to say,
"Let's fucking go."
Very seriously, absolutely disturbed the fuck out of our mind and feeling like I was going to be sick. I then told them what my friend and I had heard in the living room, and we all agreed and packed up our stuff and booked it, not cleaning the cabin like we usually do before leaving. We locked up, and as we were heading downstairs, we saw bare footprints in the dirt heading off into the path and all around the cabin. We picked up our step getting into the boat, not knowing what was watching us or around us. Threw our stuff on the boat, untied it, and sped off. I didn't even think about the head in the water anymore, or to look in the water, thank God. My eyes were just glued on the island trying to spot anything moving, but I saw nothing. When we had finally gotten our stuff packed in the car, and the boat tied up, we hopped in the car and took off. We had been driving about 10 miles, and out of the blue, Ryan, who said he saw the person outside his window, all of a sudden broke down in the car sobbing, saying,
"What was it, guys? Oh fuck, what did I see?"
We called to tell our parents what had happened on the way back, and Ryan was freaked out, and they just told us to come home safely and quickly. It was late, about 4 or 5 in the morning, but no one slept, and it was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who owns the cabin, went up that following weekend and said he experienced nothing while there, but did mention bare footprints were still lingering about, which he thought was odd because someone was walking around his property, which bugged him badly. Whatever my one friend saw in the window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping multiple nights and ended up seeking help for a couple of weeks and hopped on some sleeping medication. As time went on, he ended up being fine, but he's uncomfortable sleeping next to a window without a curtain. I to this day cannot explain what happened and why it seemed to happen to us. I cannot explain what I saw on the lake and what Ryan specifically saw. Nothing has ever happened at that cabin since that night, so we're told by my friend's dad who owns it, which I believe him. I personally decided to never go back to the cabin, which really makes me sad because I had great childhood memories there. Tommy and Kevin both have gone back and been fine, but Ryan refuses to go back, and I'm with him. A lot of people have cabins on the island, so it could have been a prank in the making that got busted when Ryan saw the person in the window. Or the person probably wanted to do something worse. I would never be able to explain what was floating in the lake. but the fact that the incident along with bare footprints and someone looking in Ryan's window at night all happened in the same night seems more than a coincidence. So this occurrence happened many years ago and will ever stay with me and change my views on allowing my kids to have their own separate phone line.